I spent over a decade working my ass off in my family's business, only for my dad to announce at a party that my lazy sibling, who barely contributed, was being groomed to take over as CEO. I confronted them, but they dismissed me like I was nothing. Heartbroken and furious, I walked out and started my own. Now that their business is failing, they are begging for my help. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and the clinking of champagne glasses. Everyone who was anyone in our small town was here, dressed to the nines, laughing and toasting to the success of the family business. My family's business. The business I had poured my blood, sweat, and tears into for over a decade. I stood near the bar, nursing a drink I didn't really want, watching my father work the room. He was in his element, the charismatic patriarch, shaking hands and flashing that million-dollar smile. My sibling, Alex, was right beside him, laughing at some joke I couldn't hear. Alex, who showed up to the office maybe once a week if that. Alex, who couldn't even tell you the names of half our employees. I clenched my glass tighter, the edges biting into my palm. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of everything we built. But as I looked around, all I felt was invisible. Ladies and gentlemen, my father's voice boomed over the microphone, cutting through the chatter. The room fell silent, and I forced myself to smile, to play the part of the dutiful child. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began, his voice warm and commanding. This business has been my life's work, and I couldn't be prouder of what we've accomplished. I nodded along, waiting for the moment he'd acknowledge me, waiting for him to say, and none of this would have been possible without my child, who has worked tirelessly to keep this company running. But the words never came. Instead, he turned to Alex, his arms slung around their shoulders like they were the golden child. And now, it's time for the next generation to take the reins. I'm thrilled to announce that Alex will be stepping into the role of CEO, leading us into the future. The room erupted in applause. My stomach dropped. I stood there, frozen, as Alex beamed, waving to the crowd like they'd just won an Oscar. My father clapped them on the back, his pride radiating like a spotlight. I couldn't breathe. What the hell is this? I muttered under my breath, but no one heard me over the noise. My hands were shaking now, the glass threatening to slip from my grip. I pushed through the crowd, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Dad, I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through the celebration. He turned, his smile faltering for just a second. Oh, there you are. I was just. What do you mean Alex is taking over? I interrupted, my voice rising. The room grew quieter, the guests sensing the tension. My father sighed, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. It's time for new leadership. Alex has fresh ideas, and I think they're the right person to take us forward. Fresh ideas? I spat. Alex doesn't even know how to read a profit and loss statement. I've been here every single day, working my ass off, and you're handing the company to them. Alex stepped forward, their smirk making my blood boil. Maybe if you weren't so busy micromanaging everything, you'd see that the business needs more than just someone who can crunch numbers. I stared at them, my jaw tightening. You think this is a joke? You think you can just waltz in and take over because Dad likes you better? Enough, my father barked, his voice cutting through the room like a whip. This is not the time or the place for this. Then when is... I shot back, my voice trembling with anger. When you're handing them the keys to the office. When you're retiring and leaving me to clean up their mess. The room was dead silent now, every eye on us. My father's face was red, his jaw clenched. You're being unreasonable. This is what's best for the company. Best for the company? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. This isn't about the company. This is about you playing favorites, like you always have. Alex rolled their eyes. Oh, here we go. The martyr routine. You always act like you're the only one who matters. I matter because I've earned it. I shouted, my voice echoing through the ballroom. You wouldn't even have a business to take over if it weren't for me. My father stepped between us, his voice cold and final. This discussion is over. If you can't support this decision, then maybe you don't belong here. The words hit me like a slap. I stared at him, waiting for him to take it back, to say he didn't mean it. But he didn't. I looked around the room, at the faces of people I'd known my entire life and my family, who stood there like strangers. And then I did the only thing I could do. I threw my glass to the floor, the shattering sound silencing the room. Fine. If this is how you want to play it, then I'm done. I turned on my heel and walked out, the sound of my father calling after me fading with every step. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped outside, my chest heaving with anger and hurt. I didn't look back. I sat in my car, parked in the empty lot of the business I'd helped build, staring at the darkened windows of the office. The party was long over, but the sting of my father's words still burned like a fresh wound. Maybe you don't belong here. I didn't know how long I'd been sitting there, replaying the night in my head, the way my father had looked at me, like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. The smug grin on Alex's face as they accepted the applause. The silence of the crowd as I walked out. I clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles white. How could they do this to me? After everything I'd done? The memories came flooding back, unbidden. "You're the responsible one," my father had said to me when I was just 16, handing me the keys to the warehouse. "I need you to keep an eye on things while I'm away." I nodded, eager to prove myself. I'd spent that entire summer working late nights, making sure shipments went out on time, dealing with suppliers, and balancing the books. I didn't go to parties or hang out with friends. I didn't have time. Meanwhile, Alex was off doing who knows what, living their best life. But whenever they showed up, even for a few hours, my father would beam with pride. "That's my kid," he'd say, ruffling their hair. I told myself it didn't matter. I was the one he trusted with the business. I was the one who kept things running. But now, sitting in my car, I realized how naive I'd been. I got out and walked to the office, my keys jingling in the quiet night. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the familiar scent of paper and coffee grounding me. I flicked on the lights and stood in the middle of the room, taking it all in. This place was my life. Every file, every desk, every inch of this office held a piece of me. I'd sacrificed so much for this business, my time, my energy, my dreams. And for what? I walked to my desk, running my fingers over the surface. My desk, not Alex's, mine. I opened the drawer and pulled out a stack of old photos. There I was at 16, standing in the warehouse with a clipboard in hand. There I was at 20, negotiating with a supplier twice my age. And there I was last year, presenting our annual report to the board, my father nodding in approval. Or so I'd thought. I slammed the photos down, my chest heaving. How could he do this to me? I muttered to the empty room. Do what? I spun around to see Alex, standing in the doorway, their arms crossed, that infuriating smirk on their face. "What are you doing here?" I snapped. "I could ask you the same thing," they said, stepping inside. "You know, if you're going to throw a tantrum, you could at least clean up after yourself." I glared at them. "Get out." "Or what?" They shot back, their voice dripping with sarcasm. "You'll fire me?" "Oh wait, you can't. Because I'm the CEO now." The words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. "You're not qualified to run this business," I said, my voice low and dangerous. Alex laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "And you are? Face it, you're just bitter because Dad finally saw you for what you are, a control freak who can't let anyone else have the spotlight." I took a step toward them, my hands clenched into fists. "I've worked harder than you ever have. I've given up everything for this company. And you? You waltz in whenever it's convenient, take all the credit, and act like you're some kind of genius." Alex rolled their eyes. "Oh, please. You act like you're the only one who matters. Newsflash, the world doesn't revolve around you. It sure as hell doesn't revolve around you." I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty office. We stood there, glaring at each other, the tension so thick it felt like the air might crack. Finally, Alex broke the silence. "You know, Dad's right. If you can't handle this, maybe you should just leave." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make them understand how much this hurt. But instead, I just stood there, my chest heaving, my mind racing. "You'll regret this," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You have no idea what you're getting into." Alex smirked. "We'll see." They turned and walked out, leaving me alone in the office. I sank into my chair, my head in my hands. The weight of everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed, pressed down on me like a ton of bricks. I'd given this business my all, and for what? To be cast aside like I was nothing? I looked around the office at the walls I'd painted, the desks I'd arranged, the files I'd organized. This place was my life, but now it felt like a prison. And for the first time, I wondered if it was time to break free. The days after the party were a blur of anger and sleepless nights. I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. My father's cold dismissal, Alex's smug grin, the way the entire room had watched me walk out like some defeated underdog. No, I wasn't going to let them win. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by stacks of files and notebooks, my laptop glowing in the dim light. I'd spent the last week gathering everything I could, client lists, supplier contacts, financial records. If they thought they could just push me out and take over, they were in for a rude awakening. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make them regret ever crossing me. The first step was easy. I called our biggest client, a man named Richard who'd been with us for years. He answered on the second ring. "Richard, it's me," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. "I wanted to let you know that I'm starting my own venture, and I'd love to have you on board." There was a pause on the other end. "Your own venture? What about the family business?" I forced a laugh. "Let's just say I'm branching out. I'll send over the details, but I can promise you better rates and more personalized service." Another pause, then "Send me the info. I'll take a look." I hung up, a small smile tugging at my lips. One down, dozens to go. Next, I reached out to our top suppliers. I'd built relationships with these people over years, and they trusted me. It didn't take much to convince them to work with me instead. By the end of the week, I had a solid foundation for my new business. But I wasn't done yet. I showed up at the office early one morning, before anyone else arrived. I didn't have a key anymore, my father had made sure of that. But I knew the security code. I slipped inside and made my way to Alex's office. Their desk was a mess, papers scattered everywhere, half-empty coffee cups littering the surface. I shook my head. Typical. I opened their laptop and quickly logged in using the password I'd guessed, their dog's name. Pathetic. I copied all the files I needed onto a flash drive, then deleted the originals. Let them figure that out. As I was leaving, I heard the front door open. I froze, my heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" I turned to see Alex standing in the doorway, their arms crossed, their expression a mix of surprise and anger. "I could ask you the same thing," I said, slipping the flash drive into my pocket. "Shouldn't the sale be here by now?" Alex narrowed their eyes. "What are you up to?" I shrugged. "Just cleaning up your mess, like always." They stepped closer, their voice low and threatening. "You need to stay out of this. You're not part of the business anymore." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Oh, I'm not part of the business? Funny, because it seems like I'm the only one who knows how to run it." Alex's face turned red. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Well, newsflash, Dad chose me, not you. Get over it." I took a step closer, my voice dripping with venom. "He chose you because you're his favorite, not because you're capable. But don't worry, I'll be here to pick up the pieces when you inevitably fail." Alex's hands clenched into fists. "You're unbelievable. You can't just waltz in here and act like you own the place." "I don't need to act," I shot back. "I built this place. And if you think you can just take it from me, you're in for a rude awakening." We stood there, glaring at each other, the tension so thick it felt like the air might crack. Finally, Alex broke the silence. "Get out, before I call security." I smirked. "Oh, I'm going. But don't say I didn't warn you." I walked out, my head held high, the flash drive burning a hole in my pocket. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the files on my laptop. I had everything I needed to bring the family business to its knees. But as I scrolled through the documents, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered, "Is this really what you want?" I shook my head, pushing the thought aside. They made their choice. Now it was time to make mine. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart. Within weeks, the family business was in shambles. Clients were jumping ship, suppliers were cutting ties, and the financials were a disaster. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, my new venture thriving as theirs crumbled. I told myself I didn't care. They'd made their bed. Now they could lie in it. But then the calls started. The first one came from my mother. I let go to voicemail. The second came from my father. I deleted it without listening. But the third call, the one from Alex, I answered. "What do you want?" I snapped, my voice cold and sharp. There was a pause on the other end, then Alex's voice, shaky and uncertain. "We need to talk." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Oh, now I want to talk?" Funny, because I seem to remember you telling me to get out. "Please," they said, their voice breaking. "Just meet me at the office. We need your help." I hesitated, my grip tightening on the phone. "Why should I?" "Because it's falling apart," they admitted, their tone desperate. "And we can't fix it without you." I hung up without responding, but the words lingered in my mind. "We can't fix it without you." I showed up at the office the next morning, my stomach in knots. The place was a mess, papers scattered everywhere, empty coffee cups littering the desks, the air thick with tension. My father was sitting in his office, his head in his hands. He looked up when I walked in, his face pale and drawn. "You came," he said, his voice hoarse. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorway. "I'm here. What do you want?" He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "We need your help. The business, it's falling apart." I raised an eyebrow, and he looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Please, I know I made a mistake. I should have listened to you. But we can't do this without you. I shook my head, my chest tightening. You should have thought of that before you handed everything to Alex. I know, he said, his voice breaking. I was wrong. But this business, it's everything we've worked for. Please, don't let it fall apart. I looked away, my jaw clenched. Where's Alex? As if on cue, they walked in, their usual confidence replaced by a look of defeat. They didn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, they said, their voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how hard this would be. I need your help. I stared at them, my anger warring with a strange sense of satisfaction. You need my help? Funny, because I seem to remember you telling me I wasn't part of the business anymore. Alex flinched, their face red. I was wrong. Okay, I was wrong. I can't do this without you. I took a step closer, my voice low and dangerous. You think you can just apologize and everything will be fine? You think you could just waltz in here and expect me to fix everything? No, they said, their voice trembling. I don't expect anything. I'm just asking. Please. I looked at my father, then back at Alex, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to walk away, to leave them to deal with the mess they'd created. But another part of me, the part that had poured my heart and soul into this business, ached at the thought of seeing it destroyed. I'll think about it, I said, finally, my voice cold. My father's face fell, but he nodded. That's all I can ask. I turned and walked out, my chest tight with conflicting emotions. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the files on my laptop. The family business was crumbling, and I had the power to save it. But at what cost? My phone buzzed with another text from my father. Please, we need you. I closed my eyes, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do? I stood in the empty office one last time, the weight of my decision pressing down on me like a storm cloud. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the air thick with memories, both good and bad. My father's pleas echoed in my mind. We need you. Alex's apology, shaky and desperate, replayed like a broken record. I was wrong. But as I looked around at the desks I'd arranged, the files I'd organized, the walls I'd painted, I realized something. This place wasn't mine anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. I took a deep breath and walked to my father's office. He was sitting at his desk, his head in his hands, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Alex was slumped in a chair nearby, their usual confidence replaced by a hollow exhaustion. They both looked up when I walked in, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. I've made my decision, I said, my voice steady but cold. My father stood, his hands trembling. You'll help us? I shook my head. No. The word hung in the air, sharp and final. Alex shot to their feet, their face red. What do you mean, no? You're just going to let it all fall apart? I turned to them, my eyes blazing. You let it fall apart. Not me. But you can fix it, they shouted, their voice cracking. You're the only one who can. And why is that? I shot back, my voice rising. Because I'm the only one who actually cares? The only one who knows how to do the job? You had your chance, Alex. You blew it. They stared at me, their mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. My father stepped forward, his voice pleading. Please, I know I made a mistake. I know I should have listened to you. But this business, it's everything we've worked for. Don't let it die because of my pride. I looked at him, my chest tight. It's not just your pride, Dad. It's the fact that you never saw me. Not really. I was always the one in the background, picking up the pieces, making sure everything ran smoothly. And what did I get for it? Nothing. Less than nothing. He reached out, his hand trembling. I see you now. I do. Please, just give us another chance. I shook my head, stepping back. It's too late for that. I've already started my own venture, and it's thriving because I built it. Me. Not you, not Alex. Me. Alex's face twisted with anger. So that's it? You're just going to walk away? After everything we've been through? I turned to them, my voice low and dangerous. You don't get to guilt me into staying. Not after everything you've done. You had your chance to prove yourself, and you failed. That's on you, not me. They stared at me, their eyes wide with shock and anger, but they didn't say anything. I looked at my father one last time. I'm sorry it ended this way, but I can't keep sacrificing myself for a business that doesn't value me. He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. Goodbye, Dad. I turned and walked out, my heart pounding in my chest. The office door creaked shut behind me, the sound final and absolute. I drove away from the building, the sun setting behind me, casting long shadows across the road. For the first time in years, I felt free. My phone buzzed with another text from my father. Please, don't do this. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned up the radio and rolled down the windows, letting the cool night air wash over me. The road ahead was wide open, full of possibilities. I didn't look back.